Welcome to This Week in Leadership Research, episode number 20. This week, I'll introduce an article about ignorance in organization. The article is titled Ignorance in Organizations, a Systematic Review, published in Management Review Quarterly in 2023. The link of the article is in the description of this video. First, what is ignorance? Karl Popper, who was one of the 20th century most influential philosophers of science, once said, "Ignorance is not a simple lack of knowledge, but an active aversion to knowledge, the refusal to know, issuing from cowardice, pride, or laziness of mind." In a recent book titled Understanding Ignorance, The Surprising Impact of What We Don't Know, ignorance is defined as how can the unknown become known and still be the unknown. The article I introduced this week focuses on ignorance in organizations. Organizations are a system of coordinated action among individuals and groups whose preferences, information, interests, or knowledge differ. In organizations, knowledge, information, and learning have been considered uncritically as resources that improve organizational performance. The implicit assumption is that the more knowledge in organizations, the better organizations are. Knowledge is an important component of human capital. A majority of management and leadership research focuses on knowledge, information, and organizational learning. Specifically, it focuses on how we know. But if we look around, we may notice that in organizations, ignorance is more common than knowing. Organizational ignorance focuses on why we don't know what we don't know. In organizations, strategic ignorance refers to the deliberate avoidance of information or knowledge that could potentially impact an individual's or an organization's decisions, actions, or outcomes. Why does strategic ignorance exist in organizations? It serves two purposes. Strategic ignorance can be used to deny liability in situations where something has gone wrong. For example, I purposely avoid critical feedback or criticism that could improve performance. When things go wrong, I can defend myself by saying, "I didn't know," or "No one in my team has shared their concern with me." Strategic ignorance can also be used to assert expertise in the face of uncertainty. For example, I focus only on information that supports my argument while ignoring or dismissing conflicting information. I use jargon or technical language to create the illusion of expertise, even if my understanding of the topic is limited. I refuse to admit a lack of knowledge or acknowledging uncertainty in order to maintain the perception of expertise. Now take a moment to recall how many expertise refuse to admit that their understanding is based on limited or incomplete information or refuse to acknowledge uncertainty. Strategic ignorance is about how knowledge is deflected, covered, and obscured. It is about how knowledge is manipulated to create ignorance. This is the fundamental difference between ignorance and non-knowledge. Non-knowledge is a lack of knowledge or that not yet known. It does not involve inattention to be used to deny liability or assert expertise in the face of uncertainty. As Karl Popper said, ignorance is not a simple lack of knowledge. Instead, ignorance is an active element in organizational operating structures and relations. What are causes of organizational ignorance? The article I introduced this week introduces 4 causes: personal motives, interpersonal relations, managerial practices, and organizational factors. First, personal motives include the fear of being labeled negatively, a wish to avoid criticism and conflicts, someone's vested interests, and psychological knowledge ownership. For example, I remain silent after I spot issues and have concerns because I don't want to tell my boss how wrong he is, being labeled by my boss as a troublemaker, or don't want to be retaliated by my boss. Even though we have laws that protect whistleblowers, such as the Whistleblower Protection Act of 1989 and the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, whistleblowers can still be assigned to different tasks that are unfit to their capabilities. They can then be fired for incompetence, not for blowing a whistle. Their organizations don't fire whistleblowers immediately. They wait till whistleblowers make a mistake. That's why whistleblowers are rare, but organizational silence is common. An example of someone's vested interests is usually found in a very competitive environment where hiding knowledge or hoarding knowledge can bring a competitive edge and increase people's power and influence. This is another example of strategic use of ignorance. In this context, ignorance is exploited as an asset, not a liability. Psychological knowledge ownership means that people who acquire and create knowledge develop a sense of proprietary ownership of knowledge. Knowledge becomes their extended self, and the people have a desire to protect themselves. For example, employees repeatedly report that practice A or program B or procedure C is problematic and doesn't work well. An administrator is motivated to keep her brainchild of practice A or program B or procedure C. The administrator keeps asking for feedback until they find something positive about their brainchild. In organizations, people with greater power and higher status are more likely to have their ideas and perspectives heard, while those with less power have their ideas dismissed or ignored. The second cause of organizational ignorance is interpersonal relations. When interpersonal relations are characterized by high levels of trust, conformity is a source of organizational ignorance. In social settings, people tend to defer to the majority view and social norms, even when they are blatantly false. Humans have a fundamental desire to be associated with others and to be accepted by social groups. Such a desire predisposes people to accept social norms. Social norms are socially accepted ways of doing things. They're sustained not only by the approval of the majority of a group, but also its disapproval. When social norms are violated, disapproval by the group stirs up a range of feelings that a violator suffers, such as embarrassment, anxiety, guilt, and shame. Those negative emotions impose costs on people who violate social norms by speaking out. If interpersonal relations are characterized by high levels of distrust, we see a high level of knowledge hiding behavior, such as evasive hiding, which means providing incorrect or partial information or a misleading promise. Rationalized hiding, which means providing an explanation that is not forthcoming. And playing dumb, which means pretending to be ignorant in order to avoid providing any information. The third cause of organizational ignorance is managerial practice. A typical managerial practice is to reject dissent information. One explanation is that people in power tend to have selective attention, which creates tunnel vision and make them focus more on themselves. As a result, people in power shift their energy away from finding answers to relevant problems to protect their interests and pursue their goals. Another type of managerial practice that creates organizational ignorance is a symbolic practice. They are the active and continuous separation of verbal activity and concrete practices. For example, in public, I say that I value transparency. But in practice, I make individual decisions as a board president when the decision should be made by a board collectively. In public, I say we need to create an inclusive environment, but in practice, I only include people who agree with me. The third type of managerial practice that creates organizational ignorance is destructive leadership behavior. It is a pattern of leadership behavior that is characterized by bullying and intimidation, that is, using fear and aggression to control and manipulate others. Abusive supervision, that is, using power to demean, criticize, or belittle subordinates. Micromanagement, that is, excessively controlling or monitoring the actions of others. And manipulation, that is, using deceit and cunning to gain advantage of others. Led by destructive leaders, employees are trapped in a paradox. They have no possibility of doing what is right, but can always be made responsible by their leaders for wrong decisions. Here is another example of how destructive leadership creates organizational ignorance. It can be achieved by purposely creating an absence of knowledge. To do so, we hire people who don't know what they don't know. What's worse, we keep promoting them and give them more power. As a project manager, if I misuse funds or engage in fraud, as long as I hire incompetent employees who have no idea what I'm doing, then no one will know what's going on, at least in the short term. Destructive leadership is different from ineffective leadership behavior because in the short term, destructive leadership behavior could improve organizational performance. However, it creates a toxic work environment, undermines the well-being of their followers, and causes long-term harm to organizations. Organizations led by destructive leaders usually have high turnover, low morale, decreased job satisfaction, and reduced productivity. In those organizations, there is a functional stupidity, which refers to an absence of reflexivity, a refusal to use intellectual capacities in other than myopic ways, and avoidance of justification. In some organizations, there is a toxic triangle, which is a combination of destructive leaders, susceptible followers, and a conducive environment. That's a perfect recipe for scandals and disasters. The fourth cause of organizational ignorance is organizational factors that include organizational goal setting, processes, and structures. For example, flawed organizational goals produce a narrow focus that neglects long goal areas. Inappropriate incentives encourage people to gather more information than is needed. When it comes to organizational structure, centralized decision-making structure and the lack of formal upward feedback mechanisms contribute to organizational ignorance. In organizations, hierarchical structures of power leads to a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way that the power captured by controlling information often justifies the very existence of the hierarchy that legitimates their privileged access to the information. Organizations may also succumb to non-learning, which refers to ignoring issues that must be attended to in the future. This is because limited attention resources do not allow organizations to address issues that are temporally and spatially distant. Non-learning can also take place when there is institutional amnesia. It means that organizations forgetting important historical events, processes, or experiences that are relevant to their current operations or decision-making. Institutional amnesia could be a result of rapid turnover of personnel, a focus on short-term goals, a lack of attention to organizational memory, or a deliberate effort to forget or ignore certain aspects of the past. An organization that suffers from institutional amnesia keeps repeating past mistakes and does not demonstrate innovation and improvement. In this video, I introduced an article on organizational ignorance. I specifically introduced the 4 causes of organizational ignorance. In the article, the author also discussed the characteristics and consequences of organizational ignorance. I highly recommend that you read the article if you want to minimize organizational ignorance in your workplace.